There's something so fascinating and so simple, but yet so complicated about baby faces in professional wrestling. Because when done right, a baby face in professional wrestling can be one of the most inspiring things to watch in this world. The thing about wrestling is, oftentimes, it's more about the narratives and the story aspects and the characters that drive people to it more than the actual in-ring work most time. And because of this aspect, wrestling acts more like an art form than a sport. And the art form that I think wrestling is the most like is the art form of comic books. Comic books are a piece of media that I think is very special, especially to me, with them containing these stories with conflicts and narratives that are some of the most inspiring things you'll ever see, with the usual story of a comic book being about a hero trying to overcome a villain. And this art form known as comics has basically shaped what it means to be a superhero. And in my opinion, I don't think there is no other hero in comics that epitomizes the traditional hero more than Superman. In my opinion, Superman is essentially the textbook definition of a superhero, with him basically embodying that image that everyone thinks of when they think about a superhero. This hero that could basically defeat any enemy, but the thing that really makes Superman great isn't his powers, it's the strength of his character. It's the fact that he's an example of what we all should aspire to be. He is someone for anyone in this world trying to do good to look up to. And in a world like professional wrestling, where that same comic book dynamic of hero and villain is applied here, pretty much ripped from that and applied to wrestling, in a world where a lot of wrestlers use comic book characters and traits as inspiration for their gimmicks, I don't think there's any other wrestler that resembles that true superhero vibe of a comic book character more than Jonathan Cena. John Cena's career, as you're about to see, is a very complicated case. At the time of me recording this, Cena is currently on his final year of WWE and on his final dates of his retirement tour, where he's about to retire arguably as the GOAT of WWE, the greatest of all time. But the most miraculous part is, in the most cliche way possible, it wasn't always this way. Heck, it wasn't even this way about 10 to 12 years ago. And if you want to know what I mean about that, oh boy, we'll get to that later on. But to understand why John Cena is pretty much the perfect resemblance of a superhero when it comes to WWE and wrestling in general, we must go back to the start. We must go back to before Cena. Months before Cena showed up in WWE, the company was in a very interesting place. Coming off what would be renowned as their most popular era ever, the Attitude Era, WWE had practically saved themselves from going out of business and losing to the rival company, WCW. And the man who spearheaded this win and its most popular time with WWE was a man called Stone Cold Steve Austin. And of course, during the Attitude Era, there were other colorful characters and larger than life stars like The Undertaker, Triple H, Mankind, Shawn Michaels, and probably the closest thing to Stone Cold, The Rock. Stone Cold pretty much was the face of the Attitude Era. But unfortunately, as with all good things, they eventually must come to an end. Going into the 2000s, Stone Cold would have to retire from wrestling due to a neck injury that would just prohibit him from continuing to wrestle. And with possibly the most popular wrestling star ever at that time having to retire and walk away from the company, you would think it would be all on a person to closely match Stone Cold in popularity during that time, The Rock, to carry the company from then on and be the face of the company. But unfortunately, The Rock didn't intend on sticking around, as he would start to pursue a career in acting. And with that, WWE would have to look to a new face to steer the ship. They would eventually try to land on a young Brock Lesnar to play that role and be the new spearhead of the company, but just like The Rock, he would start to have other aspirations elsewhere outside of professional wrestling. And at this point, it was looking like WWE might have been screwed, because at this point, it wasn't just one or two stars that they needed, but at this point, they needed a whole new class of superstars and household names. And on one fateful night on SmackDown, that's where John Cena would debut. And with one phrase uttered and a slap to the face of already established star Kurt Angle, the performance Cena would give in his first match would display one thing: ruthless aggression. And whether Cena or anybody knew it or not, Cena had just kicked in the high gear, the ruthless aggression era. Cena had originally had plans of being a professional bodybuilder before wrestling, with life being so rough for Cena in the 90s that during this point, Cena was living outside of his car. During his journey, his passion in bodybuilding would attract the wrestling business, as people in the wrestling business would realize that a man with his size and charisma would do wonders in the world of wrestling. So in 1999, Cena would start training to be a wrestler, and it would only take about 2 years for Cena to gain the attention of WWE. He would have a short stint in OVW, a developmental branch of WWE, and in this developmental, he would work with stars like Randy Orton, Batista, and even Brock Lesnar. Whether everyone knew it or not, the next batch of superstars were on the way, and Cena, the biggest one of them all, had just made his WWE debut. Now from this point, it wouldn't exactly be easy for Cena, as we wouldn't really see a rise of Cena at this point. We'd see quite the opposite, with this moment and match with Kurt Angle being the height of this version of Cena's career, as months and months would go by with the crowd not really caring or giving any reaction to John Cena. He would just come off so generic. There was nothing for you to gravitate to him. The generic tights, the generic promos, the generic music, the generic moves. Bro basically was a WWE 2K created superstar. And because of this, in that same year in 2002, Cena was about days away from being fired, with his wrestling journey sadly coming to an end, all until one day on a tour bus, where Cena would hear a couple of the guys in the back freestyling and he would join in himself. And Cena would be so good at freestyling that he would basically fry everyone back there. And the moment that would change everything was the fact that this would all be heard by Stephanie McMahon, who at the time was the head creative for SmackDown. And hearing this, Stephanie had figured that Cena should do this on TV. And from that moment, it was the birth of the Doctor of Thuganomics, a gimmick of basically this white boy rapper, but actually a cool one. And with the crunk era of rap basically being at the height of music at that time, in the early to mid 2000s, this gimmick would skyrocket, as Cena would basically be the guy to cut promos and freestyle disses to his opponents, and then whooping them right after it. And this version of Cena would get so much traction to where it would make him one of the most popular things in the company. And by 2005, Cena would walk into WrestleMania and win the WWE Championship. And at this point, Cena had become a bona fide superstar. And at this point, with Cena at the top of the company and as WWE Champion, what could go wrong? And the answer is, oh no. Okay, remember how I talked about the departure of Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, leaving the WWE in a very vulnerable place where they didn't have that sole figure and that number one guy, the face of the company, that franchise guy? Well, now with Cena's meteoric rise and him winning the WWE Championship, would also come to rise at the time of Batista, a new star on the rise just like John Cena, winning the World Heavyweight Championship on that same night that Cena won his. This would mark the two as pretty much the two main focal points of the company at this point. But the thing about it was, only one of them could be the true face of the company. But not like the type of face of the company that Stone Cold was. By this time in WWE, Vince wanted a model stand-up citizen, the perfect company man and the poster boy as a face of the company. The type of face of the company that Hulk Hogan was. Because at this time, WWE was starting to become more and more PG and more catered to younger audiences. Something it hadn't been since the 80s, since the glory of Hulkamania. So now, Vince McMahon wanted someone as the face of the company who could feel that Hulk Hogan blueprint, that role model to the kids. And with Batista not really wanting to be that guy and not wanting to fill that role, Vince McMahon would go with John Cena. But this came at a caveat, because now if Cena was going to be this stand-up company guy, the role model, unfortunately this meant the rap persona and the raunchiness that Cena had built himself up with all this time unfortunately would have to change, and not in the way that people wanted. It would start a little after Cena would get drafted to Raw in 2005, and he would start a feud with the man he debuted against, Kurt Angle, for the WWE Championship. And through this program, it would just feel different, going with the days of Cena rapping and dissing his opponents with genuinely clever and sometimes raunchy bars that maybe only the adults got. But now Cena was coming out and say these generic, borderline sitcom level type of lines and jokes towards his opponent.
Last week, I get attacked by a red, white, and blue Tasmanian devil. Frothing at the mouth. Hell, I saw nothing but arms and teeth. And that's the bad news. The good news, I just saved a bunch of money on my car insurance.
Basically, for the most part, stripping Cena of a good amount of his coolness and kind of making his character sort of insufferable to the adults watching at the time. But it would also become a double-edged sword, as around this time, Cena would start to become that model role model for children to look up to. He would start to become this beacon of hope and never giving up. The hero who had the strength to beat everybody, but it was the strength of his character that would show through time and time again, and his undeniable heart to persevere no matter what challenge he was up against. To the kids, Cena was becoming the most coolest, most inspiring superhero that you could look up to on television. He was becoming the Superman of WWE. But to adults, oh boy, did they feel the opposite way about John Cena. Because it would be at this point where fans were starting to see what was happening here. They were starting to see the Hulkamania Hulk Hogan blueprint literally being done once again through John Cena, with the repetitive formulaic wrestling matches, the corny lines and sayings in his promos, and lastly, watching Cena win time and time again. Not to mention watching Cena beat villains and heels who fans generally wanted to see, maybe win the championship, bad guys that the fans were genuinely entertained by, all for John Cena to just beat them over and over and over again. Because the thing about heroes is, the things that make them great is the struggles they have to face along the way and the struggles they have beating the big bad. Not to mention the fact that they do lose sometimes. When you have this hero who never loses and barely ever struggles, it starts to become very boring and very nauseating. And it was at this point where something would start to happen. The crowds would start to boo John Cena. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Every time Cena would come out, do a move, cut a promo, you would have about half a crowd of kids cheering him on and being inspired, and the other half of the arena of adults who didn't care for this hero's tale. This would be the birth of something that a lot of people would call the John Cena crowd reaction. The type of reaction from the crowd where you have half of the crowd cheering you as loud as they can and half of the crowd booing you and telling you you suck as loud as they can. And sometimes in certain crowds, this reaction for Cena would reach a boiling point, like at WrestleMania 22, where Cena was going one-on-one with Triple H for the WWE Championship. And in this match, on the biggest stage at WrestleMania, the crowd wouldn't be cheering on the young hero. Instead, out of spite for John Cena, they would cheer on the bad guy, Triple H. And to truly explain how crazy this is, by this time Triple H in his career was just coming off of a run that a lot of fans coined as the Reign of Terror. A 3-year span where Triple H would literally hold the main event scene on Monday Night Raw hostage, along with holding the World Heavyweight Championship hostage as well, beating literally everyone the crowd cared about around that time. And even when he lost the title, it would only be in short spurts, and he would immediately get the championship back each and every time, turning off fans to the main event scene of Monday Night Raw so much to the point where Raw would start to lose viewership and dip in ratings. So the fact that people would cheer and root for this man right here over the new young hero John Cena just with to show how hated John Cena was at that time. But by this point, despite all of it, Cena was still by this point becoming a huge star in wrestling and a huge star in media in general. Because regardless of how fans felt about him, Cena genuinely had charisma and he genuinely made you want to see matches. Regardless of the reaction, Cena was still a mega success. And that would only intensify going into the 2010s. Because see, by this point, a lot of the top stars and big name draws of WWE would start to either slow down or retire from wrestling. Batista, one of the chosen ones of WWE, would leave the company in order to pursue his acting career. Household name and legend Shawn Michaels would retire going into the 2010s and end his WWE career. And other big stars and household names like Undertaker and Triple H would start to go part-time and wrestle less and less. So at this point, Vince McMahon decided to fully make John Cena the biggest star he ever could, and basically would make WWE the John Cena show. And it was at this point that essentially would trigger probably the most frowned upon and one of the most hated eras of John Cena's career. By this point, WWE was going full on PG. So this would only mean everything that adults hated about John Cena, it would all intensify and be turned up twofold. And basically that would mean more cheesiness, more superhero-like heroic storylines for Cena, and even more attempts to appeal to a younger child audience. This would be followed by some of the most controversial storylines and moments of Cena's career. In 2010, a group called the Nexus would launch an attack and invasion on WWE. And this storyline with this group would generate genuine buzz for the WWE product and genuine buzz in wrestling fans, and their first target would be the face of WWE, John Cena. And for months, the storyline was genuinely entertaining and genuinely captivating. You wanted to see what the Nexus were going to do every week, and you wanted to see how Cena would respond. A genuine perfect hero versus a bunch of villains storyline, all until it was time for the Nexus to actually prove themselves. At SummerSlam 2010, the Nexus would have a chance to prove themselves against Team WWE led by John Cena. And at this point, you would think that the Nexus would win this here, considering the fact that this was their first big test. And if they won this, the sky would literally be the limit for this new group of stars, and especially the leader, Wade Barrett. You would think that, but yeah, so they would just fumble at the end, and John Cena would literally come back in a 2-on-1 situation after taking a DDT on concrete floor and eliminate not only the leader Wade Barrett's henchman, but eliminate Barrett too, making him tap out like a hoe. How does it get worse every time I watch it? And at this point, the Nexus group was literally dead in the water, as the first time fans had the chance to take them seriously, they went out in the saddest way possible. And the thing that would make it worse is, this was literally Cena pulling a Hulk Hogan and choosing for himself to go over instead of the heels getting the win and capitalizing off of the opportunity. And with this, Cena would literally squander and immensely affect 7 careers in one simple decision. And the situation would somehow get worse at this point, as Cena would be put into situations and storylines like the Zack Ryder situation, where he would befriend Zack Ryder, and because of Zack's friendship with Cena, he would be targeted by Kane, pushed off of a stage, and after Cena would pretty much save Zack's girlfriend Eve Torres from Kane, Cena would kiss his girlfriend? Vince McMahon is a wild dude, bro. That's all I can say. But this is why I say this is one of the most frowned upon times of Cena's career, because this is when the writing for Cena would be at its absolute worst. And regardless, despite all of that, Cena would somehow still make it work, being a massive financial success for the company. And despite the bad writing, put on some of the greatest performances we would ever see in wrestling, and some of the greatest rivalries and feuds around this time. And it wouldn't be all positive, of course, as around this period, a bunch of fans would tune out of wrestling and the ratings would start to dip, especially compared to what it had been in the 2000s. And that's something that I would say you could attribute to the shift to PG and the WWE product becoming more and more cartoony. And when it comes to the hate that Cena would get from a certain section of fans, I truly believe that right there was the reason. Because to the adults, Cena represented all the things that made them tune out of WWE and everything that they disliked about it. The bad writing and storytelling, the cheesy and borderline sitcom type of storylines and moments, the formulaic and repetitive style of wrestling and matches, and most of all, the focus on being more PG and child friendly. Cena was the representation of all of that. The new era of WWE. And so when it finally came time for him to feud with The Rock, the representation of the Attitude Era and how things used to be, it would make for one of the biggest era clashes in all of media. Later that year in 2011, Cena and The Rock would team up at Survivor Series, in which the two megastars would begrudgingly work together and get the win. But the most fascinating thing about this night was, this was the first time in 7 years that The Rock had wrestled in a wrestling ring. And despite that, despite The Rock's big comeback to a wrestling ring, John Cena had actually sold the most merch out of anybody in the company that night. This is why I called the reaction that Cena got most of the time the Cena reaction. Because regardless of how hated it seemed like you were, you are still the biggest star in the industry and arguably the reason that most of the people are even watching. And this type of reaction is something that we see with dynasties in sports all the time. At this point, Cena had become a dynasty. And at WrestleMania 28, Cena would reach the peak of his career where he would face The Rock in arguably the biggest wrestling match of all time. An iconic showdown of a megastar of yesterday versus the megastar of today. And while Cena would lose this match in storyline, what he had just accomplished in reality was one of the most awe-inspiring things ever done in wrestling, and only by a select few. Cena had went from a failed bodybuilder from Massachusetts living out of his car and nearly getting fired from WWE to the successor of Stone Cold Steve Austin and the face of a generation in wrestling. After this match, Cena's career would pretty much be stamped. But in true GOAT fashion, Cena would continue to overachieve even after this mega match in his career. And it's during these years where I believe Cena would truly solidify himself as the GOAT. When in 2015, Cena would basically low-key have another prime where he would shut down all the can't wrestle allegations that he had battled all of his career, and finally gain the respect of those hardcore fans who had hated Cena by having pretty much the best United States Championship reign ever, one where he would defend the title every single week on Raw in an open challenge and produce some of the best matches of that year. Cena had truly achieved everything as a Superman at WWE, but there is one thing that people had always wondered and wished Cena had done. When it comes to superheroes, especially the ones who are the goodest of good, people always wonder and fantasize, how would the story be if that superhero went bad? If that superhero turned into a villain? It's always one of the most fascinating things to see, because you're essentially flipping everything about that hero upside down on his head and having them go against everything they stand for. And there are stories and comics that kind of feed into this, like Spider-Man's battles with Venom, or even stories that fully give you that superhero heel turn, like Superman Injustice. With Cena being the superhero of WWE, people always wondered what a heel John Cena at the peak of his career would look like, especially at a time like 2012, where, like we just covered, was one of his most hated periods of his career. In fact, if we go back to the night after he lost to The Rock at WrestleMania 28, Cena would come out to one of the most harshest crowd reactions he had ever experienced in his career, with the crowd just letting him have it. But there's this moment where Cena pretty much mentions how much he's hated in that arena that night, and he looks around and he says,
"Would this finally be the day where I actually lash out at the WWE Universe?"
And the reaction that Cena would get from saying this would be one of the most miraculous things I've ever seen, with the crowd cheering almost like they're just begging, asking for him to finally turn heel on it. Cena looks up and then he just says this.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news that will not happen.
So what if in some crazy bizarre world we were actually able to get a John Cena heel turn? How would that look? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you 2025.
There's no way, there's no way. Say you swear to God. Say you swear to God. Put that on Allah. Say put that on Allah. Say wallahi, bro. Say wallahi. Say you swear to God that just happened. I just spent $200,000.
So yeah, in his final year in WWE, we would get the John Cena heel turn that everyone had been begging for years, but it just wouldn't match up to what everybody had imagined, as Triple H and The Rock would be one of the biggest contributors to it not working. Not to mention, with most of the material Cena had used, you could tell this is the material he wrote for his heel turn in 2012. And it would have been amazing in 2012, but in 2025, it just didn't make any sense. With Cena's final match being pretty much days away at this point, I don't even know what else I could say about the career of John Cena. He's someone who took the ball in WWE and just kept running and never looked back. And someone who's personified not only what it is to be a babyface in WWE, but what it means to be a WWE superstar in general. Cena's name has become synonymous with WWE and wrestling, to the point where he's not only one of the most known wrestlers of all time, but one of the most known humans of all time. Even if someone has never watched wrestling, they probably know the name John Cena. And to go from a broke kid living out of his car to one of the most known humans in the world is truly a superhero level feat for the superhero of professional wrestling.